If you're on the lookout for a maths program, then stick around for today's video because I am chatting to the founder of Maths Online. Okay, let's get into it. So I have Pat joining us today from Maths Online. We're going to get to know Pat and the Maths Online program a little bit more closely and show a look inside. So he's going to share his screen later on in the chat so we can all have a look at actually what the program looks like. So thank you so much for joining us today, Pat. I have the big question for you. Who is Pat Murray
Well,
and what
who
is
am I?
your
Well, thanks.
background?
Well, thanks for having me, Kylie. I'm pretty excited to be here. I started off, I guess, I'll tell you way back when I started teaching. So I was a 20-year-old, young and newly married, actually. So I started teaching. That was back in 1989, and so I've been doing this for quite a while. I was in schools for say 10 or 12 years initially, and towards the end of that period I started developing some videos that I could use with kids in my classroom, and also I was tutoring a lot as well. So these small snappy video lessons of what end up now Maths Online, but in those days it wasn't called that. And I was working with my younger brother. He was a computer coder, so he's the software sort of genius behind Maths Online. So the two, I guess, abilities of my teaching combined with Steve, my younger brother, he's a computer nous. We developed something in, it was 2001 when we first had I guess a national presence where it was sold. Our programs then were sold all around Australia. And in 2007, McDonald's, the hamburger company, approached us because they wanted to give their kids, typically 15, 16-year-old kids who get their first part-time job at McDonald's, they needed some help with their maths, and that came through because they would do this very
Wow.
basic numeracy and literacy tests, in their application. And you can always remember Frank McManus, the vice president of McDonald's, said, "Now, Pat, it's a pretty basic test, but half of them are failing." I thought, wow. Okay, so they used our program for that. A couple of years later, McDonald's did a deal with us to make our program available right through Australia, all the high school students and teachers for free at McDonald's cost. They paid us. It was a pretty good contract for us. That was 2009, 10 and 11. And then since then, okay, that partnership finished. And since then, we've just, schools have used us, just paid us directly. A lot of homeschoolers use us in Australia and particularly in the US as well. So in Australia, we're used by, more than 1,100 schools. And we've, overall, I think we've got about 370,000 students who use, Maths Online on a pretty much a daily basis,
Wow.
through the school year. So that's a bit of a rundown on the math side of things. As a family, I've got 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls, and we have the same number of grandchildren as well, in that order. Five, not the same order, but the same breakup: 5 boys and 5 girls. So quite mathematical, I think, there.
So I guess you'd say Math Online just started from your own need as a teacher, having videos and yeah, love that.
Yeah. Well, while I was teaching, I did a lot of tutoring as well at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and I've got to say that tutoring kids one-on-one actually helped me to develop really good techniques, because I could try things out. I won't say they were guinea pigs, but I was able to try things out and see what their immediate reaction was. So I was, I guess I was always blessed with the ability to remember what works, what doesn't. And then over time, I was able to, use those with the kids I was tutoring, use that in the classroom, and then really design a program that is just, just works. Okay, so I've always thought that, teaching math shouldn't be difficult. I mean, so conceptually, often people struggle. Wow, it's really hard. But I try to break it up and into something that's actually quite simple to understand,
Yeah.
and quite quick to understand. Because I mean, the way to really learn maths, you've got to practice it. Okay, you can't. It's not a spectator sport. So you've got to get shown a really good way of understanding it, of being able to do it, and then quickly get into the practice of it with immediate feedback. So that's the design of our program. It's just not the videos, but it's actually of getting kids to practice as soon as they can. And if they've got to watch the video again, go back and watch it, not a problem. I mean, they're short videos. They're like little clips, but those clips have been very well crafted and curated. So that's one of
perfect.
the
That kind of
keys.
leads me into my next question is what would you say that makes maths online different or better than what else is out there?
Okay, well, the key difference is the video instructions. So because they're so crafted and concise, and kids can watch them very quickly and then get into the practice. I mean, I often hear a story, and you might have heard this. Pablo Picasso, the famous painter. He was about 83 years old, and he's having coffee with a friend of his just at a cafe. And while they're having coffee, he's sort of sitting down and just drawing. He always brought some pens and paper with him. He's just drawing on the placemat as it was, and he's drawing this thing. And after about 20 minutes, his friend looks at it and he goes, "Wow, that's my gosh, that's an incredible drawing. I'd like to have it. Can I buy it off you?" And Picasso's sort of thinking, and then he goes, "No, I really want, how much would you charge me for it?" So Picasso goes, "Oh, I'll sell this to you for $75,000. His friend goes, "What? $75,000? Only took you 20 minutes. And Picasso goes, No. It took me 63 years and 20 minutes to develop this drawing." So in a similar way, when we created these, our videos and that, it might come, it's only a 5-minute video, 5 or 6 minute video, but it's been crafted from, sort of decades, 30 years of experience and knowing the best way to actually get that message. So that's, so that makes the biggest difference, people say, is the videos. And because it's, I guess, some people say, the lack of, or sorry, sophistication, or trying to make something simple. So simplicity is the new sophistication. So I guess that's always been an underlying thing for me, to actually always think, how can I even teach this a bit easier for people to understand? So that's what drives me. And we're lucky because we're not just in Australia, we're in the US, we're in India. We create all these, and we get exposed to all these curriculums all around the world. So I actually get to see lots of different ways of teaching maths, which is quite extraordinary, really. Just, not too many people have got that opportunity. So sometimes stuff that I find is, that's a much easier way to get it. It might not fit quite exactly in our curriculum, but I might use it as an extension activity or so on. So it's, some good practices are there.
So the bulk of the content obviously is the videos. Is there anything that goes along with that?
Well, so straight away after the videos, they get straight into either a worksheet or interactive questions. I mean, I'm very big on pen and paper. All right. So if the kids, even though the questions may appear on the screen, we really like them to either print them out or work with a pen and paper. But particularly, for the higher school kids particularly. And you really need that flow of work. Okay. Kids don't really learn very well if they're just, plugging stuff on the screen or on the computer. So we're really big on setting their work out, much like they've seen in the examples, and just building that flow of work. And, there's lots of research now talking about pen and paper, how the brain connects stuff that you write a lot better than if you're just, seeing stuff on the screen and so on. So there's heaps of research out there that's saying that's the best way to go. I've always thought it's the best way to go, but it's being validated now by lots of the latest research.
Great, we're seeing that in this day and age, that's for sure. So leading on from there, how much parent involvement do we need for Maths Online?
Okay,
the program speaks directly to the child, so I'm wondering
Yes. Okay, it varies a bit. I mean, a lot of parents say that they can they've just sort of, set it go and away the kids go. Other kids need a little bit more motivation, possibly. So depending on how well, kids can typically learn by themselves, but it's designed that they are become, quite independent learners, okay, because you've got the video instruction, you've got the questions and so on, which are then marked independently or marked automatically. They can follow what we have as what's called the course planner. So at the start of the year, parents can just choose what year the kids are typically going to go into, and then they can just, a few clicks of the button and there's the course planner for the whole year for them. So that's been a fairly new development, which a lot of the homeschooling parents think, wow, that's a bit of a lifesaver. So we've got that. The reports that are emailed weekly reports are emailed back to parents to keep track of things. So, it doesn't necessarily need much parent involvement. The program sort of is set up to be fairly independent.
So you mentioned, which is wonderful, that Maths Online is now all over the world, but what we use here, is it aligned to the Australian curriculum?
Yes, especially aligned to the Australian curriculum and state by state as well, because every state still has their own curriculum. So, I mean, the idea of a national curriculum is a little bit of a furphy. It's not, they talk about national curriculum. There's no, it's every state does their own thing slightly differently, particularly in the senior year. So when year 11 and 12, very different across the states. Mm-hmm. K to 10, fairly similar, right across the states. But then, different other regions, different countries are different. A fair bit. There is, a lot of overlap, but then no, it's really important that you've got a curriculum that is designed specifically for where you are. Otherwise, you're sort of never sure about, what sort of gaps are there or what's in here that doesn't need to be in here. So no, it's designed. So if you're in, New South Wales, or you're in Victoria, or you're in Queensland, we've got the curriculum designed specifically for those states.
So is it then a complete curriculum? Is it, once someone signs up to Maths Online, is that all they need to cover all their maths, or do they need to supplement it?
Yeah, well, look, it's a great question. If your child is going to go on and go to university and probably do something in maths, mm-hmm. then I would suggest that you also grab a textbook as well.
Right.
Okay. We are actually designing a series of textbooks starting from next year, but we haven't got that ready yet. But so if you're doing higher education involving maths, then you'd probably want a textbook to go along with it. Otherwise, it is a full curriculum. Yep. So there's most parents have kids who aren't necessarily going to go and do a university degree in maths. So the maths we've got is enough. So
I have something that's not necessarily just specific Maths Online related, but given your experience, I thought you're a good question to ask.
Okay.
We have a lot of parents that are really intimidated by maths as a subject and teaching maths. What advice or words of wisdom would you give them?
Okay, well, look, if they're intimidated, they're not alone. Okay, so and they're intimidated for a pretty good reason. Okay, it's because quite often they may have struggled themselves with maths for whatever reason at school. They might have found themselves either struggling or because it's such a long time ago that they've just forgotten some stuff. So that's easy to do. One thing I would certainly say is if you are anxious about maths, try not to project that onto your child, because they'll pick it up straight away. Never ever say, "Oh, I was hopeless at maths. I was never any good at maths," because they'll pick that up as well. So, but there's so many good resources now, Maths Online being one of them. But in terms of finding some good videos that you can watch and practice yourself, it's amazing how quickly that you can understand something that you thought I just didn't get that before. And it's an interesting as well. You may not have been interested in maths. It's a bit like myself. I was never interested in history at school. I mean, I had no interest at all. So I didn't like history. I wasn't. But now I'm quite interested in history of various things as an adult. And I can pick up stuff as an adult much quicker than I reckon I would have at school, just because I've got that interest in it. So as a parent, if you've got a bit of maths anxiety, which is a term which I actually thought, what's that? But actually is true. Maths anxiety is a particular term that is real. There are solutions, but I would say have a look at find some good videos that you can, and practice some maths lessons yourself, And it doesn't matter how far you go back, but practice some yourself, and then you sort of lose a bit of fear just by doing some of that stuff yourself. So that would be my best advice.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I think that we might jump into some screen sharing and actually have a look at Maths Online.
Okay, let's do that. All right, I'll share my screen. All righty, so I'll just actually look at the chat. Jenny, the video lessons has helped my son heaps. They're simple and easy to understand. All right, thanks, Jenny. All right, here we go. So I've already logged in, and we've got, so you can see, from K through to 12. And just here, year 7 and 8 is sort of doubled up a bit because the Australian curriculum has changed. There's a version 223 that is still hanging around, but this is what most people would be onto now. But look, I'll just jump into, let's jump into a year 7 and 8 one. I'll grab a year 7 one, and anyone in the chat wants me to look at something specifically, just yell out. So it's broken into number algebra, measurement and space, stats and probability. And we have these great things, weekly revision tasks, which I'll show you towards the end. But if I just clicked on a lesson, you've got, sorry, I'll move that. Okay, so so that's the stream. These are all the chapters, topics within that. And so you can see, so that's pretty comprehensive. So that's just for that. Measurement and space, you got a lot there. Stats and probabilities is a smaller chapter. But in year 7, yeah, it's really concentrating on this number and algebra. Yep. So I might just jump onto a what's an interesting one to have a look at? Mixed numerals to improper fractions. I'll just click on that one here. So the video will start.
Now, this lesson we're looking at changing mixed numerals to improper fractions.
And I'll just scroll through there. That's me talking, but you can see that I don't know if you can see that, but that's it's about a 4-minute video. And so I'll jump into a little bit of an explanation there, a bit of a diagram in this one to show what's happening and how it works, and then showing how to do things without a diagram. So like a 4-minute lesson there. So as soon as that lesson's done, the option is
now, this lesson we're looking at changing.
Oops, just stop that. Option to do a worksheet. Mm-hmm. So you've got a worksheet that can be printed out and worked on straight away. And this answer code here is basically, match up. So 1.5 would be 3/2, which then you sort of look at the answers and pick the answer that matched up with them. So if you use the worksheet in that sense, you would, once you've completed that worksheet, I'm just trying to find, here we go. Sorry, enter the answers here. So you type your answers from A to Z and then submit them, and it will mark it automatically. After you do that, you can then see the solutions as well to those questions. So that's one way of doing the work. There's questions as well, and these are the interactive questions I was talking about earlier, where if we click on start the questions here, all right, change to improper fraction, 4 2/5. All right, well, these ones actually don't really require much pen and paper, actually, so it was actually pretty easy. So 22/5, and you'd submit it, you get it right. And what's happening here, there's a little mastery thing as we're getting it. We're moving along the mastery thing. When I get to this stage here, hopefully I'll get a star. All right, it says a little star there. And we continue on that for for 10 or so questions related to that lesson there. And it's interesting, one of those stars, once you've done, 10 questions here, you won't get the 4 stars because you just haven't done enough questions. It'll ask you, do you want to practice a bit more so you can get your 4 stars? So that's quite motivating. And that's one of the things too. I mean, kids have got to be a little bit motivated, or you try to motivate them. And even simple things like this is surprisingly motivating. Okay. So
if a child was to drop out at this point right now, does it remember where they were? Does it pick up in the same? How does that function on a day-to-day basis?
So that's good question. Yeah, so it'll save at the point. So if we jumped out of here and clicked on somewhere else and got back to that later on,
Yep.
you can sort of see, yeah, that's where we're up to. And if we open that up, it will continue on from that point. So,
I'd like to see something in one of the younger grades, if you don't mind.
yeah, sure. Okay, younger grades. All right. So let's have a look at, say, something in year 4, maybe. Right.
I guess my big question is if a child gets to the end of all of their practice questions,
Yes. Yeah.
they're struggling, what happens at that stage then?
Okay. And they're still struggling.
Yeah.
Okay. After their practice questions. Okay. Good point. They'd probably want to go back and have a look at possibly an earlier year. And that's one of the good things about it. I mean, you don't just get the 1 year, you get access to every year on the
right.
program.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's really important. So
I like that it's very simple.
yeah, it's very simple. Yeah, yeah.
Go straight
So
into your grade and off you go kind of thing. As a parent and as a child, I can see that that's really easy to find your way around.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I was just going to say that like the weekly revisions, and this is particularly good because we're talking about, quite often in math you'll hear about, what's better, a skills-based program or a spiral-based program. Okay, and the fact is that both are good, but they're both bad if they're on their own. So you need a skills-based, a mastery program plus this spiral thing. So a spiral, I'll give you an idea what spiral means. If we look at these weekly revisions, and I clicked on one of this, and I'll just show you the worksheet. This will be, I'll just maybe zoom out a bit so you can see more of it at once. But this will be a weekly revision is essentially, 26 questions in this case every week, which is a revision exercise. It's not based on, just what they've done that week. Mm-hmm. It's based on a cumulative amount of work that they would have done up to this point in the school year. All right, including stuff from the previous year. That's really important because it allows the kids to go back and revisit stuff every week. So that's the spiral approach where you get this opportunity to keep on practicing. Because it's interesting. I mean, some people with maths, they'll just sort of practice fractions, for example, and they do 2 weeks of solid fractions, and then they don't see fractions again for another 10 months. And they expect, at the end of the year, if they have an end of year exam or end of year review, that the kid's going to remember their fractions, but they're not. But if you have this tied into our mastery program, which we do, then they get some, this exposure every single week.
Yep.
So that's been one of the big things that have really made the program what it is as well. The access to this particular weekly revision.
And so who is marking this weekly revision?
Okay, great question. Okay, so let's say you've printed the worksheet off. Mm-hmm. Okay, you printed the worksheet off. You've got your child to work through it all on pen and paper. So they've done all that. And then they go back to the questions here. And then they will just type in their answers. So click.
So really, they can do it themselves.
So the parent doesn't have to do anything. So they'll just be looking at, what did they write down in their worksheet? All right. So then everything gets marked for them. And then, as a parent, then you get this great report, a color-coded report, green that they got them right and red if they got them wrong. But you can sort of see, and if you're seeing that, because these weekly revisions, they're asking the same questions in general. Like question 1 might always be about number. There might be question 5 might always be about fractions. And then if you see that, they're getting question 5 wrong all the time, that means, okay, well, go back and do some earlier work or do a couple more extra lessons on fractions. So
we have a question. Do you have to set the weekly revision or is it built in?
So it is built in. Now I'm going to, so I've logged in as a student there.
So in saying that, and I might be jumping the gun here, the child probably can't jump around then in lessons. They need to work sequentially through the program. Is that correct?
No, they can jump around. So they certainly can jump around. Yeah. That's okay. They can jump around, but you can set them tasks, and that's what I'm going to show you now as a parent. I'm
So
just
do
trying.
you have to set tasks for your... Okay, let's scale that back a bit. As a new homeschool family opening up maths online for the first time, as a parent
Yep.
who really just needs to be hands off, do I have to set tasks or can I just open it up? The child starts at year 5 because that's the year and off they go and they're fine.
Yeah. So you can say, okay, you're there in year 5. Open up. There's year 5. Bang. All right. Start on that. Um, and away they go. You can say start on that lesson, and that's how they can start.
Okay, perfect.
So that's a start. What you can also do is in terms of a diagnostic test, if you want to, and these are very useful. If they do a diagnostic test before or after the end of the chapter, so you can see that particularly if you're sort of thinking, well, I think they're in year 5. I mean, they're going in year 5, but maybe they've missed a bit of stuff in year 4. I don't know and that happens a lot because it just does. So what we always think is a good idea, it requires a little bit more hands-on, is to ask your child to do a short diagnostic test. So you click on here, and you've got a diagnostic test before the chapter, and that way then you'll be able to see, well, if they're sort of getting everything wrong, or a lot of wrong, it might say, well, they're not quite up to here. Maybe they need to do the similar lesson in year 4, just to sort of either remind themselves how to do it, or maybe to build their confidence, or maybe they have got some gaps that they just sort of didn't pick up. So that is good. So this diagnostic is good in 2 ways: doing it at the start and doing it at the end of the chapter. And at the end of the chapter, you might want to do the more comprehensive one. So it's like a chapter test. So that's okay. That's a good thing. That's pretty handy to do as well. So
Go back, another question, just things popping into my head is, so say you've done grade 4, 5, and we get to grade 6 and they're struggling with a particular topic, and we do the process that you've just said. Can you go back and redo lessons that you've already done in previous years?
you can, yeah. So there's no block out of previous stuff you've done. You can always go back and review. So that's again one of the beauties of the program.
Okay, so if my child gets ahead, can they go ahead a whole year?
Yes, they can do that too. So
Yep, I guess because as you showed, you have access to everything. So really, you've got the freedom and flexibility. And so I guess so does your child. So that could be a bit of for some kids, they might decide I'm just going to skip this year and go on to the next one.
well, they can, and that's. I mean, I've seen. Yeah, it's an interesting one. We've seen kids, do 2 years of maths in the space of 12 months, quite easily. And while I'm talking about that, it's probably good to point out too, because particularly, parents might feel a little bit anxious. They might think, oh, my kid's falling behind, or they're not where they should be, chronological in terms of their age. I always say, well, look, don't be surprised if your child might be a year behind, inverted commas, but they sort of get to a stage where things just start click. They start to click. Math starts to click for them, and they can do 18 months of work, 2 years of work in the space of 9 months. It is amazing. I've seen it just so many times.
Yeah.
So there's one thing you don't want to be worried, oh, my child's fallen behind or anything, because things can happen quite quickly. And the other thing too, I always say is, the timeline that people have is a bit of an imaginary timeline, okay? Just because they're in year 7, for example, doesn't mean that all of their subjects are at a year 7 level. Some of them might be higher, some might be lower, but it's just an imaginary timeline. So don't get too concerned about comparing yourself or comparing your child to where they should be against, where other kids are, at that age. So, I just said, just don't panic too much about that. Don't be too worried.
Yep. So as a parent, do you have the ability to restrict your children's access to different grades?
No, we don't really. So it's a matter of just keeping, if you want to restrict stuff, you just sort of keep an eye on
Yeah, so you would have
what
to
they're
be keeping
doing. But
Okay, we have a, all right, can you run this alongside another program?
can you run it alongside another
So I'm
program?
thinking maybe, I guess if you had you know, maths workbook that you bought from a teacher supply store or something,
Oh
and
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, certainly, yeah, that's fine, yeah, and you'll find that stuff that you might get stuck on in that book, you can find a video that explains it a bit better, and so on. So that's so for
okay,
sure, yeah.
yeah.
But
And
there's
we have, are there any real life or hands-on learning activities for some of the strands or lessons?
some real life stuff. Well, we've got exercises that they can do, but we don't. I mean, typically it's a mastery program, and they're doing stuff that can be marked, via the interactive questions. Though they have, like I said, hopefully do that on pen and paper.
Yep.
But in terms of materials like things like blocks and all that, we don't supply we don't supply any of that sort of stuff. So
Okay.
those sort of hands-on things we don't have as a component of the program.
What about gifted children? Is there
How
a
can you extend them?
extent
Yeah, I
there?
just saw that. How do you extend them? You would probably give them, sort of advanced work when they're a bit, as they're a bit older, and kids really get excited if they're, if they might be in year 6 and they're already doing year 8 algebra work. It's a pretty exciting time for them, I've got to say. So that's how you can extend them using this program. Outside the program, I always love books on logic, logic puzzles and stuff like that. Number fill-ins are really good for any sort of age, and you can just buy a magazine from a newsagent there that have a lot of those puzzles, or you can download a lot of those. They're on free resources, online, typically. So there's plenty of stuff there as well that you can do. But I think in terms of extending them, you could just go ahead a little bit in the program.
Well,
I'm going to log in now as I've got the message. Okay.
while you're doing that, I'm
Yep.
going to share a link because I'm aware that Maths Online offers half price to all homeschoolers. Is that correct?
Yes, to all
I'm going
homeschoolers
to
we do.
drop a
Yeah.
link to that in the chat, and of course
Okay.
I'll share the link in the replay if you miss it. But that's the link there for the half price option for all homeschoolers.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Okay, so
Great.
we're
Okay.
logged in as a parent. Is that correct?
Okay, so I'm logged in as a parent now, or as a teacher. So this is a demo I use for schools as well. Say I might have a whole lot of different classes, but I'll show you what we're talking about with the with setting up the task for the year. So it's called. So I've just clicked on task here, and this course planner. So we would add typically you won't have class 1, class 10, all that. You'll have your child's name there, but I'll just click on class 10, and we'll just go to next, and you just select the course. So that was a year 10. That was my year 10. So I'm just going to click on that. You don't really need to look too much into details here, because it's but all it's saying is that we're going to go in week 1, we're going to do this. Week 2, we're going to continue with that. And that will go through the whole of the school year. So scrolling down, and it's finishing here on December the 8th. All right. And where are we? We're in June now. So it's basically grabbed all of these, the whole course, and snaffled it into a smaller period of time. And then I click on next, review and complete, and hit on create course plan. So it's taken me, there's about 3 or 4 clicks that's just done that. So when your student logs in, okay, so again, this is from the parent view. All right, so this is from the parent view. But when your child logs in, they will, as soon as they jump in, they will have that course in front of them to start, and they'll just work through that. I didn't go through and show you how to manipulate that course and move topics around because, but there's an option to do that as well, or to take stuff out, put stuff in. So you can edit all of that stuff. But really, that's how easy it is to sort of get started in terms of if you want to set the whole work for the year. And then you'll get, your reports and so on as your child works through the program.
So I noticed it sort of gives you you might be doing 4 to 5 activities, I think it said, in a week.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if the student doesn't complete what the system is expecting them to complete in a week?
In a week. Okay, well, it's very flexible. I mean, so the task will still be open for them to complete. And if you find as a parent, you say, well, okay, we're actually not going to get all of that stuff to complete, you can go and edit that. And so if I jumped in here and let's say in week 3, there was a bit of a write-off for any sort of reason, you could go and edit that task. I'm jumping into a particular thing here. And you could say, okay, well, these were the lessons that we were doing. And I'm just going to we don't worry about the topic test, for example. I'm just going to get rid of that. And the addition and subtraction, I'm not going to worry about that either. Okay, so I'm just going to leave for that week. Multiplication and division is fine. And you can just save that. So that's changed that week. And the ones that you just had taken off, you might think, oh, we might catch up on that later. Now, I didn't take a note of which ones I just got rid of, but you could go back and say, okay, we've probably got a bit more time in here. I might throw those lessons in here. I'll just edit that, go back to the lessons now. And I might say, add a couple of those lessons that I just took out, if that makes sense.
Perfect. All right, so I might just put a quick word. If you're watching the replay, check the description area for the half price.